Go4Leadership, the podcast with Daniel and Gert.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Go4Leadership Podcast. My guest today is Tim Schütte.
Go4Leadership interviews.
Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Daniel. Happy to be here.
Cool. Tim, like always, you have 30 seconds to introduce yourself to the audience.
30 seconds. Okay, let's see. My name is Tim Schütte. I'm currently 46 years old, living close to Stuttgart, and I'm working as the local CEO for Paychecks Germany over here. And that's pretty interesting because I got my onboarding during COVID-19 lockdown. So everything from home, and to take over a role in a company where you lead 160 people in lockdown from remote is pretty interesting. I think that's one of the reasons why Daniel invited me. Besides that, I'm a motorcycle geek. So if anybody's up for being shown around this beautiful area to drive his motorcycle, email me or contact me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Thank you, Tim. And like I remember many of our talks and conversations, this podcast goes about leadership. And I know that you know a lot about leadership and also about attitude and mindset. So I'm very curious, how would you describe or define leadership?
And in preparation of that question made me sweat already. So leadership in my mind is something that needs a lot of self-attention, if you will. So I think that's one of the most important points. And I was lucky enough to have a manager in my career in a very early stage where he said, you are now a people manager. So you always have to think, act, behave, and communicate like this. Be aware that you are somewhat a role model, at least to your team. And I think that is leading to the answer of your question. How would I define it? It is about more listening than talking. It is about giving direction. It is about aligning goals. And it's most of all, I think it's about walking the talk. So do what you say and say what you do. Mm-hmm. There's a German saying which says there's no need in teaching children anything because they will copy you anyway. And I think that's a good saying for that. So whatever you do, your team will listen and look closely, and they might be copying you in some extent. And that must be something you're aware of.
I like that a lot. And I remember one teacher told me about my kids that look into the mirror because I was complaining about some behaviors of my daughters. And she was saying, well, look at the mirror. Yeah. And I was first completely shocked or questioning, is she really serious? But then I realized it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So you touched the topic of listening, and of course, as you jumped into a new position, a new role, how do you listen these days, where you are far away, maybe from your people, to the team?
Really kind of filling up my agenda, to be honest. So I took over a role in something that we call in German Lohnbüro. So it's about payroll. I have no clue about payroll. So I'm the receiver of payroll. That's how far I got involved so far in my career. And to look at it and to learn about it, you need to be very awake and ready and able to listen to people. So what I said from the beginning, I mean, in a leadership position, you always have your core team, like your managers reporting to you. And we spend a lot of time in team calls as well as individually. But on top of that, I told my whole team that I want to spend half an hour with every single person individually. And it's kind of my mantra these days to tell them that, hey, whenever you see something that seems odd, doesn't make sense, or seems a bit outdated in terms of processes and how we handle things, give me a call. So my door is open. And I think that's part of the current success we're having, so that they feel honored, they feel heard, and they feel seen, even though everybody's sitting remotely right now. And I think that is, again, it's a huge task. I mean, 160 times half an hour. So, and I just decided that I will do that once a year. So everybody should have once a year the opportunity to talk with me, and then to kind of freely speak up. And that works quite well. So I learn a lot these days about that.
So I think that also says a lot about you as a leader, or as I would say, regarding to your style. As you say, you are open and you take the people for granted and serious. So how do you be empathic and also, let's say, be open for those arguments that you maybe get during these calls? Because I can imagine that there are maybe also sometimes complaints where it is hard to get implemented, or maybe things that you would need to ignore in certain ways. How you scope with that?
And I think it's back to walking the talk. So first of all, I changed a couple of things in our own HR department from the start. So we've been very poor on providing vacation days. Salary is an issue, as always. And whenever I am able to change something, I say that. When I might be able, and I have an idea of direction, I really mark that as, this is my idea. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know when it is going to happen. So I'm very clear about the goes, no-goes, or maybes. And I think that is super important, because if you speak up to either an individual or a group of 160 people, and they might understand you differently. So whenever you make a point, make sure that it's well understood. And I think that's one of the most important things these days, because doing that via video to people you haven't seen personally before is adding a piece of complexity, because they don't know you, right? And they get a two-dimensional image of you. They see you on screen if you're having a Teams or a Zoom call, but they don't know, okay, how serious is that guy? What does he mean? Did I get everything within this conversation in terms of mimics and gesture? And I think it's super important to be aware of that.
So I can imagine that you just touched base something that I think we can further explore, which is this video conferencing that we are all in particular, also a very intimate situation that an employee is talking to the CEO of a company. So how do you create open atmosphere, in particular if they don't know you yet? I can imagine that maybe there is a certain ice to break.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So for the very early ones of those 160, it was harder, because now they've seen me in all hands calls, and they know that I'm trying to walk the talk, or talk the walk, or whatever around. So we see the first benefits. So now for the latecomers, it is easy. But what I always do is, so I switch on my video, and I don't demand that from my guys. I see that 90% take that invitation, even though they might not have video on all day long in other calls. So that's the first positive thing. And then it's like looking at your backgrounds, right? So either you have some kind of picture like I have right now, and you can talk about that picture. Wait, is that a Windows or Apple thing, or is that one you took yourself? Or you see where they actually live, right? So you see, okay, what's the style of their office? What's the style of their living room if they are working out of their living room? And usually you find something in the background to talk about, and that breaks the ice pretty fast. For myself, I've got a very messy office, I must admit. So I like those virtual backgrounds, and I have different ones for different occasions, which might be a clue as well. So talking to my people, let's say on a Friday afternoon, you'll find pictures of a brewery in the background. So just to really break the ice and say, hey guys, it's weekend is knocking on the door. So yeah, I know, and you want to leave the office and work as well. So let's get through this and then have our first weekend beer. And I think stuff like that, it makes me a bit more approachable because they see what is about me. So I use only self-taken pictures in the background. So they learn a lot about me. And there again, it's about being a role model, right? It's walking the talk. If I show some private things in here, they feel much better if they do the same.
I like that approach, and I think that's very powerful at the beginning, because I talked with another colleague before that we show these days a lot of intimacy into our own house. Actually, it's much more than before. Before you could go to the office and I won't say that you had your own personality, but of course it's something very intimate to show your private house or your private office or whatever. So I think that's a good method here. Tim, switching gears a little bit, you mentioned that you joined the role and you didn't have touched, let's say, the work as such before. How did you get into the material, and how could you guide the team into a direction that leads them for the next climb or for the next plateau?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting one as well, because I mean you go through that interview phase when you're applying for a new job, and part of that is to learn something about that role, and for me, it became pretty obvious that taking over the leadership about a decent-sized company, there are a lot of experts on board already. And what was missing was kind of the next steps in terms of direction, growth, digitalization. So my background, I'm a social worker, but never worked in that, but I sold a lot of software and hardware components. So digitalization is very close to my heart, and I can look at things and say, hey, wait, can we automate that? And is that really a manual task, or should we do that differently? Are there other solutions? And I think that's the core of my task right now. So the first couple of months was a lot about listening. And then I try to, whenever I approach change or want them to do things differently, then I try to do that in a very, let's say, coachable manner. So I'm not coming with the solution. Most of the solutions for today's problems are already sitting in the people's heads. They know what to do better. They are experts in their common field. And so the only thing that I do is I lead through questions, if you will. So what do we do there? Yeah, it's like this and this and that. Okay, does it make sense? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, would you have an idea about doing it differently so that we spare some time, or it's not that kind of hard work or something? Yeah, I might have an idea. Okay, let's talk about it. And that's kind of an average conversation I'm having these days in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, but I think that's also a very powerful message that you need to bring the people. And I also used to say that you as a leader never have the knowledge because you are at least one position away from the topics that are occurring. So it's important to listen to the staff and get their impulse to starting change. So maybe you can also give us a glimpse, maybe in a difficult situation in your career. So where did you or had to demonstrate leadership skills and attitude?
There are several. So when I had my first management role, I got a team. It was something that the company wanted to test out, and there was no extra headcount. So within the management circle, it was said, you'll provide some people for Tim. And you can imagine that I didn't get all the high flyers. out of those teams. In fact, I got somebody who had been with the company for a long time and did not have a future in the company for at least the same time. So, and he was like 20 years older than me. So I had the unlucky task to see, okay, what do we do with him? And finally, we found an agreement that he needed to leave in a even from today's perspective, I think in a very respectful manner. But it was a hard thing because other managers tried that and failed, and it was the youngster who kind of solved it. So that was a hard part. And I think the next thing I'm thinking about when you asked this question is was working for a company where they wanted to do a structural change that was against everything I believed in terms of how you should treat people, how business should be run. So I listened to that on a workshop for 2 days and then decided that if that is the case, I can't work there any longer. And I am aware that I'm a very lucky guy that I never was really out of work, but I think it's about to stand up for your principles, and that's part of leadership as well. And it might be a hard time to take that decision, but I think it's the healthiest thing you can do. So you'll meet friends or teachers, or you'll win or you'll learn, but you'll never lose, depending on how you take it. And I think if that's a core of your beliefs, that enables you to be a good manager.
And I think that's also something that you just touched base is that never lose your principles. And let's say you as a leader have not only the right, you have the obligation to say no. That was something that I was taught very early on. If you are a project manager leading a project, let's say being the leadership role in this project, it's your task to say no. There will be nobody else who would say no.
And it's much more important and powerful to say no than to say yes. Saying yes is easy.
Absolutely.
And saying no is much more difficult and powerful in the same way.
So maybe let's go into the Corona situation as you touched base this. Do you think there's a difference between how you lead teams or have lead teams before Corona and now during Corona times?
There is a difference because all the communication is virtually or a lot. So I tried when we had this no lockdown situation last year in August, September, I was in the office, but anyway, we sent everybody home in March. So I didn't really meet a lot of people face to face personally without a screen in between. So yes, it is different and it's much more difficult. You need to be much more aware of things that might go wrong. So just last week I had an all hands call and I wanted to make compliments to one of my colleagues, and she misunderstood me totally and thought it was a no what I just did. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly the opposite of what I wanted to do in front of all people. So it took some time to kind of catch that and have a follow-up conversation and we both agreed. So I was kind of using the wrong words and she was reading it wrongly on top of it. So that did not mess up our working relationship, but it was crucial for at least an hour or two. And I think you need to be aware of that much more than sitting with people in a room where you feel their rage or their anger or their happiness, because it is different in a call, and it's especially different if you are having a call with more than one party.
No, I absolutely agree. So let's maybe come to the end of our podcast. What is the biggest learning, let's say, that you also by reflecting the mistakes, but what is the biggest learning that you take away for yourself, managing teams and being a leader?
Biggest learning. I think one of the biggest learnings was, so I've been an individual contributor as well, right? So nobody is born as a manager. And I always thought I would have fun to do that. What nobody could prepare me for is that's a totally different role. It's a totally different job. It's like, hey, you've been great in selling software. Here's a car to fix. Go and work on the valves. And you're starting to look at the tires for the valves, and they mean the ones in the engine. It is really a totally different thing, and nobody can really prepare you for. So I was very lucky 2 times in my career as an individual contributor. I had a super nice coach and mentor, if you will. And my first manager in my first leadership role was an absolute asset, looking back at things. So I think that is the most important part. If you're promoted to lead a team, look around for a mentor, for somebody who coaches you. Make sure that you listen. I think as well to those guys as to your team yourself. So don't be the smartest guy in the room, and try to be the dumbest one in the room, and get smart people on board, because that will make you successful. And it's your task to pave their way for their success. And I think it's something that comes from mindset. So how do you look at other people? And that is, for me, the biggest learning.
Wow, I like that a lot. So let me finish maybe with the last sentence or the last question. What would you have said to yourself before you started your professional career? So to the younger Tim.
And you see me struggling. So I was never anxious or frightened, and I think I would have said, you know what, keep that. If there's one thing you should keep that will make you successful, it's that. Don't be afraid. Don't be frightened. Don't be anxious. If you ever have the feeling that you're working in an environment that makes you feel that, leave it. And I think that's a very, very important sentence. So I wouldn't have changed much looking backwards, because I had quite some career already. But I think if there's one thing to strengthen, it would be this not being afraid of anything.
I like that a lot. That's a great finish. Thank you so much, Tim, for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Go4Leadership, the podcast.